Martin and his team specialize in insurance appraisals, acquiring a piece of jewelry that is important to you, for instance, a diamond engagement ring or much loved family heirloom, comes with responsibility. Martin Fuller Appraisals help you to protect this treasured asset, irrespective of its monetary value. Yes.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here. So you can hear me and you can see my screen, and we're going to discuss a number of topics tonight. We'll have a lot of fun, hopefully, and a lot of questions. But I've been a gemologist since 1986. Actually, I was practicing gemology before that without a title, but just because I loved it. And I was taught by a Norwegian master goldsmith who knew I knew what I knew, and so he didn't need a piece of paper. So back in the 70s, I was doing appraisals because he wouldn't do them, and I had to tell the customers their appraisals weren't ready. So he taught me how to do appraisals, but back in those days, it was a little more Wild West territory. Ben probably knows about that. Few of you have been out there since then doing that. And I've had clients bring in my old appraisals, and they're 2 or 3 sentences long and a value. It's come a long way, to say the least. And those of you who do appraisals for a living probably understand that. But I started with, in a goldsmith shop, actually. That was one of my first jobs. I worked in retail very shortly for a short period of time, and found out that jewelry was a lot of fun, and there was a scientific aspect to it. The gemology, identifying gemstones, was what really turned me on. And also wondering where jewelry really came from, because in the retail jewelry stores, it was just shipped in, bagged and tagged, and you put it in the showcases. I knew it had to come from somewhere. So after a few years in retail, I had an opportunity to go work for a Norwegian master goldsmith. And that's how I learned how to make jewelry. And that's where I found my love for gemology blossoming. After a few years of that, I knew I was never going to be a master goldsmith, and not because I wasn't Norwegian, but just because I'm the kind of guy that if I had painted the Mona Lisa, I would still be trying to fix the smile. So goldsmithing was not for me, not in a timely manner in any case, but gemology and the science, that was exciting. So what I'm going to do is take you on a little bit of a journey, a little bit of my journey, as I learned more and more about appraisals and grew bolder and bolder, and sometimes stuck my toes into waters that maybe I shouldn't have, but hey, that's how you learn. So let's go along with this and see what happens. This is going to be a fast journey. So write your questions down, and at the end, we can talk about any questions you might have. So we're going to talk about appraisal assignments, large and small. Again, most of us in our early career as gemologist appraisers, we start out doing insurance appraisal assignments because that's primarily what people need. But there's a whole world out there besides just insurance appraisals. Now, you want to take all of your experiences in your life and bring them forward into your profession. You have I don't want anybody to miss anything. Okay, we'll talk about insurance appraising and beyond, because when you do an engagement ring every day, it feels like Groundhog's Day after a while. You've seen enough wedding bands, you've seen enough 1-carat solitaires. That's all well and good. And I'll tell you what, there's nothing more important to the person that's sitting across the table from you than their engagement ring or their wedding band. And you have to respect that and treat it like that. That is the most important thing in their world. Do you get bored with these? You might. So stretch yourself. Try something outside of your realm. There are a lot of things that we could be doing. Equitable distribution appraisals, where an estate or people that inherit things are trying to share them equally amongst the heirs. So estate and probate, your legal wills, non-cash charitable donations. We have dissolution of marriage. We have prenuptial agreements. One that we're doing here in the office and we find is a lot of fun is called a jewelry triage. And ask me some questions about that later on and I'll tell you about it. But it's a great service that you can provide your clients. And then of course there are fundraisers. And by fundraisers, we'll get into a little bit about volunteering and some of the work that you can do to help your community, and will help your business as well. Engagement rings. Well, sometimes they can be pretty interesting. This was 12 karat stone. This was interesting, but even the 12 karat diamonds can have their little issues, as you can see right here. This is a laser drill hole, but it was the only inclusion in this diamond. Surprises are everywhere. So ask what you can do for your client. Your client probably doesn't know exactly what they need when they walk in through the door. They just say, I need a value on this, but you know there's a lot more to it than that. So share your experience, do what you love. This is your passion and it's infectious. Not that infectious. So fair market value appraisals. This is an assignment that I had for the Smithsonian a few years ago. And does anybody know what these are over here?
Ivory.
Well, they're elephant tusks.
Yeah.
And you can get a better view of them here.
Mm-hmm.
So these were, as they say, harvested, which I don't think there's any good word for taking elephant husks, but these were taken back in the day when safaris for hunting large game were popular. So these are before, these predate the bans, and they were able to be donated. Now, I have found that USPAP is an interesting force of nature in our field. For those of you who don't know what USPAP is, it's the Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice. And here you're looking at a fur coat. Well, you may want to try this sometime. You can step outside of the gemological world. We had a client who had a number of luxury items, including fur coats like these, and USPAP says that you don't have to be competent in a particular item at the beginning of an assignment, as long as you disclose, I don't want to call it your incompetency, but your lack of competency in a particular area. If you disclose it to your client and tell your client that you will become competent by the end of the assignment, then USPAP allows you to take on that assignment. So I didn't know a lot about furs when I started this, but fortunately, in my building is one of the largest furriers on the East Coast. And with their expertise, I was able to take care of not only the jewelry for the client, but their fur coats as well. So you can also hire a colleague. You don't have to know everything or do everything by yourself. Your colleagues can be your best resources. If you have somebody who's an expert in a particular area that you're not comfortable in, hire them to do the porcelains, hire them to do the furniture. Here's an interesting assignment that we had. This happens to be the camera that Neil Armstrong took to the moon and was donated to the Udvar-Hazy Museum. Now, I wasn't the appraiser on this, but I was hired by the appraiser because they were on the West Coast and they knew that jewelry appraisers and gemologists were very detail oriented and could take good pictures. So they sent me to be their ears and their eyes and to take a look at this camera and document it and send my findings back to them so they could do the valuation portion of the program. But by stretching your boundaries a little bit, you can get into some very interesting assignments. Again, be hired by a colleague. So put yourself out there. They may not be gemologists, but they may need your services. Equitable distribution. Kind of like this painting, it sort of tells you about the trials and tribulations of equitable distribution. There is government work that you can do. Because I'm here in Washington, DC, and most of the DC chapter is, but Welcome, rest of the world, by the way. Ben's in Texas. Good to see you, Ben. Who do we have out there? Audrey. Audrey's in Arizona. Well, most of your locations have some kind of a federal or a local government that needs your services as well. We do a lot of work for U.S. Customs and Border Protection, the U.S. Secret Service. We also have drug enforcement, and we have the Federal Marshal's Service as well. And then there's local law enforcement as well. Shirlene, who's not here tonight, and I have testified several times in Fairfax County and other counties locally for certain cases against jewelers or other criminals. Now, here's a couple of things that I've appraised just for fun. We all get these wild assignments. So I had the great fortune and the honor to work with Secretary Albright on her pin collection. And Audrey, who's out there in Arizona, was here in Washington at the time and assisted us in this project as well. So that's a Cartier piece right there, believe it or not. It's not made any longer. It's very difficult to get pricing from Cartier, but with the help of Secretary Albright, we were able to get them to nudge and give us some information on this one. And this is her eagle brooch that she was sworn in as Secretary of State wearing this. There's some famous pictures of her being sworn in, and this is almost falling off the lapel of her coat because she didn't clasp it properly. She was a little excited. These are a few other pieces from her personal collection. She has a lot of brooches, as you might have heard. And in this project, there were pieces from Europe and all over the world, and researching the hallmarks was just fascinating. So we worked on this project for about 3 years. And this is when she put her collection on exhibit at the Smithsonian Institution. And this is the team that I had working on the project. This is Dr. Foreman, who many of you in the Washington chapter may remember. She passed away a few years ago. This is Audrey, gemologist, and she's in Arizona now, but she used to be out here in our chapter. Of course, Secretary Albright and several of my staff from here in the office. Now, charitable distribution. This is a fun project that I got to work on. Solid gold trash cans and mailboxes encrusted with gemstones. Wouldn't you like to have one of these in your front yard? Well, these are from Sidney Mobell. Sidney Mobell was a jewelry artist in San Francisco, and you might have heard about his Monopoly set that's entirely made out of gold, silver, platinum, and gemstones. And this has been all over the place. And now it's in the collection of the Smithsonian. He donated so many pieces to the Smithsonian. It's amazing. Chess sets where the pieces were solid platinum and solid gold. The sad thing about a charitable donation by the artist, and this is how the law works today, is that the artist, if they donate their own goods, they can only take the cost of their labor and the cost of their materials. Now, if it had been sold to a client and that client donated it, then they could take the full fair market value. Here's another charitable donation. We did this one for the GIA Museum. If you don't know who Derek Kotzenbach is, he's worth looking up. He's sort of a Renaissance man. He does the goldsmithing, he cuts the gemstones, he does the designs, and he puts it all together. This is a kaleidoscope that's now in the GIA Museum. It's totally made of gold and platinum. He cut the gemstones. These are all tourmalines from Maine, which is where he lives. And he loves Maine gemstones. So he faceted the gemstones, matched them all up, put this whole piece together. Even the end caps, the lenses of the kaleidoscope are made out of quartz that he cut and polished. And of course, when you look through the kaleidoscope, you see all the gems that are creating the colors inside. Another project that we were able to work on, we were very honored to work on this one, was with the Dalai Lama, who donated several items actually to the Library of Congress. And we got to test and examine several pieces that were in very high carat gold. This is the staff at the Library of Congress. And this is a butter dish, believe it or not. I think most of you have one like this, probably. This is 22 karat gold. And then there's expert witness work. Lately, and I don't know how many of you are appraisers out there and get to come across this, but lately we've been running into a lot of synthetic diamonds that have been undisclosed to clients. This is a kunzite and diamond necklace. This is the pendant on this neck chain here. And this was brought to us by a client who bought this in auction. And we have a couple pieces of technology here in our laboratory to identify synthetic gemstones. And they turn certain colors in certain situations. And then the computer will define which ones are synthetic. So in this particular case, anything that's in red is a synthetic gemstone. So those are all synthetic diamonds that were put into this necklace without the client's knowledge. Here's a tennis bracelet. They bought 5 of these. Every single one of them was filled with synthetic gemstones, synthetic diamond. And we were just doing gemology here. This was not an appraisal. This was for expert witness work. Here's a necklace, probably 20 some carats in diamonds in this necklace. And look how many, more than half of them were synthetic. Here's the report on this. I've redacted the names, but you can see it's natural kunzite and of course natural diamonds here. And valued at $75,000. Now, if we look down here, this is from the back of their report, and it says that they have synthetic diamond detection device. Didn't say they used it, but it said they had it. Here's another view of that particular necklace. Here's another fun project that we got to work on. This kind of became a magnet for giant pearls. And you might have heard about these. They were found in some of the islands in the Philippines from the Tridacna gigas, which is the largest clam on the planet. And people were bringing in these giant pearls. You might have heard of the Pearl of Allah, which was a 14-pound pearl found at the early part of this last century. And it became very notorious and had almost as much bad luck as the Hope Diamond was purported to have. And so that was the most famous one until this one came along, which was twice its size. And it happened to look like Queen Elizabeth. So the owner called it Her Majesty. Well, I had never seen a pearl like this, and it had a GIA report stating that it was a pearl indeed. And they called it a blister pearl. So trying to value this was quite a project. And I reached out to many people who are pearl experts around the world. And I came back with a consensus that these really aren't all that solid of a pearl. They're more the shell than they are a pearl. There's a very small area of it that is the blister that forms inside of the shell, but most of it is shell, and they've been selling them as pearls. So even the GIA kind of got taken on this one. Then another one came along. This one, it was 3 times larger than the first one, but you can actually see the shell outline on this. These people smuggled this out of the Philippines, and then the president of the Philippines started to put price tags on their heads. So these folks and their pearl disappeared. I don't know where they went, but probably into hiding. And most of those pearls have disappeared now that the government of the Philippines has kind of made it clear that these aren't to leave the Philippines. Well, they're not really pearls in any case. So here's another project that we had fun working on. And this was also for the GIA Museum. This is a Corsage ornament from the turn of the last century. And this is a topaz here. And this actually had to be valued for insurance purposes. This was not a donation. They already had this in their collection. But when museums lend something from one museum to another museum, it has to be insured in the process. So that's what we were doing, is doing an insurance valuation on this. Although, you know, it could never be replaced. This is it in ultraviolet light. We love to play with ultraviolet light here. So there's lots of people that you can do work for as a gemologist appraiser. Museums locally and nationally. This is some fun in the Blue Room. I hope most of you have had a chance to go back into the Blue Room of the Smithsonian Institution. I know our chapter on occasion has group tours back here, and it's just a pinch me experience. This was on one of several occasions we've had to help out with the Hope Diamond. So here's the mounting of the Hope Diamond in my hand, along with some of the collection of colored diamonds, large colored diamonds. I don't know if you had a chance to see that exhibit. It was probably about 10 or 15 years ago. And every time I go there, I get younger. I don't know why. This is actually measuring the Hope Diamond with a digital leverage gauge. In case anybody wanted to know how wide it was, it's 21.77 millimeters. One of the projects, we've had about 4 opportunities to work with the Hope, because they pull it out of the setting on occasion to do research on why it's blue and are there any sister stones and that sort of thing. There were rumors that it was the French blue diamond originally, and that the corners were cut off of it and it was turned into the Hope Diamond to disguise it. And that's a fascinating tale of adventure on its own. But there was some work done that pretty much discouraged the fact that any of those little points could have been turned into other blue diamonds that would have been the children of the Hope. Most of those points were ground off into powder, so they don't exist. There's no hope of offspring for the Hope. This is work on the necklace. They wanted to know exactly, nobody had ever really researched the Cartier necklace that the Hope was set in. So a few years back, for the 50th anniversary, Harry Winston built a new temporary setting for the Hope Diamond, and they came down and put it in this setting. It was in it for a year, and while the Hope was on display in the new setting, we were able to take the old setting and analyze all of the gemstones, calculate the weights, do the color grading and clarity grading, and this was for curatorial purposes. We call this the hopeless. There's no hope in there. This is a fascinating mounting, and for those who haven't had a chance to see it up close and personal, 4 of the prongs hold the Hope Diamond in place. 2 of those prongs are permanent prongs. The other 2 have little tubings and pins that you can pull, and you pull those 2 pins, the prongs come away entirely, and the Hope easily comes out of the setting. They did that so that much less risk to the Hope taking it in and out of the setting. We also looked at it from a structural standpoint and pointed out anything that needed to be repaired while the Hope is out of this particular setting. So there's a fracture in the structure there. And this is one of the benefits of being able to play with it. It is intoxicating. So here's a fun and interesting project that I got to work on for a client. And this was more an authentication process. The client bought this as a Renaissance piece of jewelry. So it was touted to be from the 16th or 17th century. And they brought it to us to verify that. And that's not something I had really worked on before. So this was a fascinating project to take on, but it was fraught with more questions than answers when we got to work on this. So how do you prove or disprove that this is from the Renaissance? Well, you got to start somewhere. So this is the back side of it, by the way. The front side is a cameo depicting a biblical scene. I think that's Abraham and Isaac, and they're sacrificing the ram instead of sacrificing Isaac. Worked out a lot better that way. And it has a large pearl down here with a dragon on it, and it's embellished with pearls, rubies, sapphires, and diamonds. And there's a little cameo top piece up here. So this treasure from the Renaissance, what would you do? It was sold for nearly $200,000. Actually, it was sold for more than that. How would you go about authenticating this? You might talk to experts in the field, but who? You might talk to museums, auction houses, technical experts. Where would your detective work take you? Well, and where would your detective work take you? So as far as those resources, we contacted Sotheby's. They have a person who's an expert in Renaissance jewelry, and we showed it to them. They didn't feel that it was truly an authentic Renaissance piece for a number of reasons. But when you're talking to people about these things, most of what they're giving you is a feeling that it's just not right. It's just not real. Well, it's hard to tell a person whether something's authentic or not because of somebody's feeling. But what you have to do is just talk to as many people who are experts in this field as you can. So talk to your colleagues, talk to the museums. We talked to the Smithsonian. They didn't have anybody. We talked to the Walters Art Gallery, which if you haven't been there, that's a fascinating museum. And they have experts in Renaissance jewelry there. But they were reluctant to make a call on it because a lot of these museums have been fooled by jewelry that was purported to be Renaissance and turned out not to be Renaissance. And so they're a little skittish about saying yours is Renaissance or yours is not Renaissance, but they point you in new directions. It's kind of like every person you talk to leads you a little further down the road. We talk to dealers, people who deal in this sort of thing. There's an amazing antique show in New York, and it's also in Europe, called TFAF. If you haven't been there, it's the European Fine Art Foundation, and you practically have to be invited to go to this, but it is the top dealers from around the world and the top fine art from antiquity forward. And the only pieces that can be in there are pieces that have been vetted as authentic. So that's a great place to go and talk to people about, is my piece authentic or not? Then there are scientists, and this is kind of, we're talking a lot about science today, follow the science, especially with COVID and that sort of thing. And people are getting pretty frustrated about that too. But scientists are an important part of our field. Well, we're gemologists, we're jewelry scientists. So the bottom line, colleagues are your friends. These are a couple of my colleagues. This is David Wolf. David Wolf is an appraiser in New York City. He appraised all of the jewelry that was found after the trade centers collapsed. That was quite a project. He's worked on a number of very large projects. He did most of the safety deposit boxes after Katrina destroyed New Orleans. Talk about the claims, talk about the incredible watches that were in safety deposit boxes, the jewelry that was destroyed. It's just amazing the way the projects that he's been able to work on. And then he connected me with Michael Cohn from the Fashion Institute of Technology. He's head of their jewelry department. And both of these guys spent a lot of time with me looking this piece over, and to a T, anybody who knew this material or felt they knew this material or had studied it a lot just said there's something wrong with it. Here's Michael and David working. This is up in New York City. So the Walters gave me, and the Victoria and Albert Museum gave me a couple of insights, and they both pointed me to this person named Mark Wipinski, who works with the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. And he was the lead scientist when the Victoria and Albert Museum got a hold of some papers that showed drawings of jewelry by a jeweler from the late 19th century who was making all of this Renaissance jewelry and selling it to museums around the world. All of a sudden, the Victoria and Albert are looking through all these papers going, wow, that looks like something in our collection. Wow, that looks like something in the Walters collection. That looks like something in the Metropolitan Museum of Art collection. And these papers are all from this forger showing his drawings. So they suddenly realized that a lot of the things that they thought were Renaissance pieces in their collections, vetted Renaissance pieces, might not be. So they hired Mark Wipinski to come in and apply sciences. They took pieces that they knew were Renaissance pieces and had him do electron microscopy and other analytical techniques on the enamels in these pieces. And he learned and cataloged the chemistry of the real Renaissance jewelry, and then how chemistry changes over the years to the Renaissance revival period in the late 1900s. And they have different chemistries altogether. So by analyzing the chemistries, he was able to, in these enamels, he was able to definitively tell us that these were late 19th century enamels. This was not a Renaissance piece. But take a look at it. I mean, the way these diamonds are set, this is one little tricky thing right here. It's hard to see, but that is a diagonally cut wire. So that was cut with a tool that didn't exist back in the Renaissance. If you look carefully on some of the cameo here, there's actually a lacquer that's peeling off. So someone, like licking a rock to make it shiny, somebody had put lacquer all over the cameo to make it look shiny and more beautiful. Here are some other close-ups of some of the elements of the piece. You can see how crooked some of these riveted gemstones are. There's a little bit of damage to some of the enamels here, but you'd expect that over time. We sent this to GIA and had all the pearls checked, and a couple of them were cultured pearls. This is the backside of the pendant here. And the goldsmithing on this is not quite Renaissance style goldsmithing. Here's the dragon at the bottom. You can see the enamel coming off of him. That actually, I believe, had was bead nucleated. So here's the gist of the report from Mr. Wipinski, and he said, in summary, he talks about the enamels, and based on his research, the enamel compositions indicate a date no later than approximately the mid-19th century. So it, rather than having people's feelings, well, it's not quite right, I don't think it is Renaissance, here's actual science that's telling you that no, it's indeed not a Renaissance piece. Now, there's other aspects of our field that a lot of people in the appraisal world are not comfortable with. Jewelers are very comfortable with this, but to broker or not to broker. And I will just tell you that it's a service that you can provide your clients that's a great service as an appraiser. There's almost nobody better to do this for your clients. And you can wear two hats if you're very open and transparent about the process, even if it's just turning them over to an auction house. Again, we talked about this USPAP compliance. Nowadays, if you belong to the American Society of Appraisers or the National Association of Jewelry Appraisers, there are rules that you have to follow when you do an appraisal in order to produce a document that's credible and a value that's credible. And USPAP does allow you to go into other areas outside of your expertise and learn as you go. These are museums that we've had a chance to work with. Here's another one. This is in New York, the Museum of Natural History. And a lot of the work that we have done in museums, particularly like the Smithsonian and such, is volunteer work. And I emphasize how important it is to you in your career to, on occasion, when it's required or when it's beneficial, mutually beneficial, to volunteer your services. You can learn so much working for an institution that may not be able to afford you, but they can benefit from your expertise with the curatorial body of knowledge that you can help provide them on particular pieces of jewelry. And those projects, those volunteer projects, first of all, you learn, you couldn't pay to work on some of these pieces, you know, that you just wouldn't have the opportunity otherwise. And you can learn so much from working on these pieces. And then it can lead to other projects. So some of the volunteer work that we did led us to a paying situation where we got to go and look at the Aurora Collection. If you don't know what the Aurora Collection is, it's one of the largest collections of colored diamonds, and it's laid out in the pattern of a butterfly. And this collection goes on display. It's been at the Smithsonian, it's been several other places, but it's been, it was in I think, Ben, wasn't this in Texas? And then it was coming to the Natural History Museum in New York for the grand opening of their gallery. And the curator just wanted to make sure that they were getting what they were supposed to be getting and that there were no hiccups that they could be blamed for. So they wanted each stone in this collection to be inventoried. And they wanted it done in a very short period of time. So this was late in the COVID period. This was in October. We were able to go to New York and work with the curator there and inventory the entire colored diamond collection. And if you look here, there's a map and it's numbered, and every diamond has its place in this collection. Well, we found several diamonds that had been mislaid into different places in into the map. So it was actually very beneficial that we did this project for them. They were very grateful that we were able to find several mistakes in how the previous museum had packed it up and put it and shipped it. This is volunteer work. This is at the Hillwood Museum. And this is the first time I got to work with the nuptial crown. This is, in case you don't know Hillwood, it's Marjorie Merriweather Post's home in Washington, D.C. If you haven't been there, go there. It's one of the best kept secrets in Washington. It's a huge estate in the middle of Washington, but you feel you're in the middle and there's nothing around you other than beautiful gardens, beautiful architecture, and an incredible collection of European and Russian art. Some of the things that you can do to expand your boundaries are become an author. We've had the great fortune to work with Dorothy Rainwater, who was the probably the preeminent expert on American silver, and we helped her to write her last book, which is the Encyclopedia of American Silver Manufacturers. And we also did some work for Hillwood on one of their publications as well. And then, of course, Secretary Albright's book. So to build a bigger practice, take a risk. Offer your services for free. You won't believe how it will come back around and benefit you. Volunteer. and it can lead to some really advanced projects. All of my volunteer work has ultimately led to me being able to work with things that I could have only dreamed of working had I not done the volunteer work. You can work for a state, trust companies, banks. Everybody needs your services. And I am so fortunate to be a gemologist doing appraisals in the Washington area, where the tide of people coming in and out is tremendous. The State Department coming from all over the world, military coming from all over the world, high-tech companies. The tide of people moving in and out in the Washington area is incredible. And every time they move in and out, they need new insurance policies. So it's a great opportunity for us to see things that we'd never see if I was where my parents grew up in Davenport, Iowa doing this. I would not see a lot of this jewelry. So be a teacher and always be a student. It's a wonderful life doing what we do. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.